My conversation today is with author and podcaster Miguel Connor, a man who needs little introduction to those familiar with Gnosticism and the esoteric podcast community. Miguel hosts Eon Byte Gnostic Radio, a forum for academic and practitioner-based discussion on the many variations and interpretations of Gnosticism, both ancient and modern. He also curates and produces content for his project, The Virtual Alexandria, and The Virtual Alexandria Academy, which is replete with all kinds of content for subscribers, ranging from tutorials to full-on online courses. Miguel has artfully blended good conversation with his finely honed style as a host and interviewer, as well as introducing a multimedia approach, incorporating memorable and dramatic clips from film, television, and pop media from the last several decades, in crafting his many videos, podcast intros, and presentations. It is truly something to behold. We sat down to talk about ancient and modern Gnosticism, the spiritual modality of Shamanism, embracing the ambiguity in life, and much more. The ensuing conversation was one I'll not soon forget. I'm Ike Baker, and this is the Arcanvm Podcast.
You're definitely one of the more visible personages in Gnostic and related communities. Online, been doing this for a number of years. And as a host and interviewer, sometimes we can get bits and pieces of your background. But for those who aren't necessarily familiar with your backstory, can you tell us how your journey to Gnosis began?
I don't think it's that interesting. Like many in your audience, I was always a seeker. I was always the kid that didn't fit in, that was asking the wrong questions, that felt that reality wasn't cracked up as it used to be. And this sent me to a troubled teenage years, listening to the wrong rock and roll, drugs, reading the occult and on the edges literature, and so forth. And in my adult years, I was what I like to call a spiritual hitchhiker, although I call myself a Roman Catholic. Up until my 40s, my mom was always into the ecumenical spirit of the Catholic Church, which was great. So I would just try on a lot of different religions and go to like an ashram to worship or practice Muslim prayer. I was always just looking for that experience, for the answers to those questions. What's life? Why is there suffering? Yada, yada, yada. And through my spiritual hitchhiking, it seemed none of the religions really ever answered anything until I started delving into Gnostic thought and philosophy early in the 2000s. And I slowly, you might say, migrated to it. It just worked out for me. I like that quote by Eric Davis. He said one time at a Gnostic conference, he said, what separates the Gnostics from perennialism are the archons. And I think it made sense because not just perennialism, but most religions kind of whitewash the idea of suffering or evil in the world. You know, it's God's plan and everything's going to work out and yada, yada. Yeah, I'm going yada, yada because I've heard it so much. And the Gnostics were the ones who really focused on the shadow of the world. Again, it's not like they were exactly edgelords, but like Joseph Campbell said, you have to face the horror and the awe of the universe. And other philosophers and thinkers have said that, the Misterio Tremendum and the Mysterium Fascinante. And the Gnostics really did that. They said, all right, there is this holiness and transcendence, this shamanistic experience of expanding your consciousness and traveling to alternative dimensions. But there's the idea that there's evil in this world, evil inside of you, and this needs to be addressed. So that's one of the reasons Gnosticism really, it was really for me, if you would, of course, and other ideas we can discuss, the idea of a simulated universe, the inner journey, the promoting the goddess or the divine feminine in Judeo-Christian thought and even paganism and so forth. And it's just the podcast I started a long time ago was just my way of being of service, as we would say in Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, I'm learning this, so I want to give it away too. What do they say? It's not sobriety unless you give it away. I like to say it's not gnosis unless you give it away. You express it through some medium. And the podcast was Aeon Byte was one of my ways of doing it. And for some strange reason, people have been interested all these years in Gnostic and Hermetic philosophy.
Yeah, that's excellent. Actually, we have that in common. I'm in recovery as well. I haven't been in a while, so but I used to go to meetings. That all kind of fell apart for me during COVID. But but there are so many applicable things in that trajectory to spiritual development that I'm constantly seeing over and over and hearing people. I mean, I have, we don't have to spend too much time on this because these are very personal insights. But I have found that path of recovery, mundane as it may seem, to be a species of initiation in and of itself. It was deeply, deeply spiritual work. But my next question was actually going to be, what was the impetus for the podcast? But I guess one question that I kind of had that I'm personally interested in. So did you stumble upon Gnosticism in an academic setting, or because there's so much chatter, there's so much noise about Gnosticism out there on the internet right now. I'm not even certain as to how much was available, as you say, in the early 2000s. So it was kind of a niche thing. I think we had like Elaine Pagels was writing about it maybe. But what was your entree to Gnosticism? How'd you find out about it?
I remember being in college. I went to a Catholic university, St. Thomas in Houston, run by the Basilians. Oh, I'm losing my voice. My family's going to be so happy. It's like my gift to them today if I lose my voice, and the dogs and the cats. But I went to there, and obviously requirements. You had to take certain theological classes. I enrolled for Old Testament studies, but these priests were, again, Basilians are very, very intellectual. I mean, the scholarship, they have no problem admitting that Mark was basing his, or not Mark, but Matthew and Luke were basing their stories on pagan gods impregnating women. I mean, they could keep their faith and their scholarship separated, but this priest in Old Testament studies talked about the Gnostics, and I always thought, why is he bringing him up for Old Testament? But it's almost like something he had to do. It's like there was this group called the Gnostics who believed in reincarnation and this gnosis, and just blah, 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 stay away from them. He was reading the lines, and he didn't even believe him because he was a scholar, taking care of it. And that really was it until, of course, the whole, Elaine Pagels, the Da Vinci Code, the sort of rise, the romantic rise of Knights Templar and Cathar interest in the early 2000s. And all that just became, I just started hearing about it. And slowly, again, I was very ecumenical. So I slowly started reading the literature. And I thought Elaine Pagel's book, I would tell people, if you want to walk away less informed about Gnosticism, read the book. It's a beautiful, inspirational book, but I think she has another agenda. But I read it. I read the Da Vinci Code. I read the Nag Hammadi Library. But my aha moment was really like kind of frustrated at reading this. Yeah, it was all familiar for some reason. The idea of Sophia just seemed natural. Like many, I always thought the Holy Spirit should be feminine, and Sophia was just taking care of this role and much more. But I really wasn't getting it until I read Valis by Philip K. Dick, and that's when that spark went on, and I went, oh my God. And in that spark, I went, oh my God, this is like the Matrix. Because I'd seen the Matrix in the late 90s and didn't think about it. Was, again, no idea about Gnostic thought. And then, of course, you start studying the Matrix, you realize that the Wachowskis were certainly influenced by Philip K. Dick and possibly directly ripped off Grant Morrison's The Invisibles, read the Invisibles, and I was off to the races. I got the Gnostics, and I've been slowly learning throughout all these years that we still are at the very infancy ages of understanding Gnosticism and all it has to offer. We've only just begun, as Karen Carpenter saying.
That's right. Actually, that's funny. The Valis trilogy, and specifically, actually, can't remember if this is part of the trilogy, but it really clicked for me with Radio Free Album.
That's Valis, but in fiction, Valis is autobiographical.
Right.
The other one is just as normal. The publisher at first didn't like Valis, so he had to create a kind of a third person, if you would, just stand sci-fi fare.
Yeah, it was. I had a realization reading that book of I felt truth, and I was, we're all kind of one way or another cut from a similar cloth. I was the same way. I studied comparative religions, and I opened every drawer in the chest, to try and see if there was anything in there, and it was. I was just taking a break, really, from nonfiction and reading fiction, and boom, there it was. An experience of almost like a recollection, like a anamnesis or something like that. Reading his work. So that's very interesting that you have inspiration from that too. And I've heard you talk about it before, mentioning it on your podcast as well. But you're someone who's constantly talking to both established and emerging voices in the community dialogues of Gnosticism, comparative religions, philosophy, theology, even the occult, really. So what are you making right now of this explosion of interest in Gnosticism?
I don't know. There's an explosion. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I assume people hate it. I assume even occultists don't like it. It's just, I guess there is an interest. I don't know. Obviously, as I make the argument about these are Gnostic times, it seems A, Gnostic philosophy makes sense. B, the Gnostic warning or nightmare has come true. For example, simulation theory is now very popular, and it's mathematical and scientific. I mean, even people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Elon Musk say there's more than a 50% chance that we are in a simulation of some sort. The Gnostics said this 2,000 years ago and got mocked for it, ridiculed, and nobody was really talking about it in the West. Yeah, you had Plato's allegory of the cave, few exemptions, but Western society just rejected this vehemently. And the Gnostics, well, they kept saying it through the Cathars and other groups, and suddenly in the 20th century, they're sort of validated. Also, the idea of an inner world. I mean, this is something that now we've lost the idea of having an inner journey, and both psychology is seeing that there is a huge unconscious. God knows marketers and government agencies know this, but people are waking up and are realizing this inner journey that the Gnostics and the Neoplatonists talk about, and the Merkabah Jews was right. It is a solution to so many of our problems. That came true. The idea that we are not in control and there are shadowy agencies that are not the smartest that are ruling this universe and reality, that's also very popular. People think it's conspiratorial, but all sides use it. All sides have a conspiracy, right? That seems to be, and obviously with the popularity of David Ike and John Lamb Lash and Alex Jones and whoever the government's blaming for something, it's very popular. Again, the divine feminine this has become very popular, and the Gnostics have their own unique slant to it. As I was saying today in the group, wisdom, who the Gnostics worship, is the most sought after and rejected entity or idea in human nature, and we're coming to realize this now. The other one too is when talking about our age, when you look at the Gnostic myth, you have this being called the Demiurge or Yaldabaoth who takes over the universe. And he wants to create this perfect mechanistic, by the numbers copy of the higher realms where everything's ordered, where all energy sources us, we're the energy source, are used efficiently to power this universe, and everything will work well if we just follow this massive bureaucrat system of the demiurge and his archons, very technocratic. And that has come true. And in fact, William Blake and some of the romantics warned about this. They said there is a shadow side to the Enlightenment, and this is this scientific, by the numbers, logical, reasoning force that's going to cut us away from our source. It's going to cut us away from nature, from the divine feminine, and it is very dangerous. I mean, William Blake, who, if you read his work, is definitely influenced by Gnostic thought and Gnostic mythology, talks about that his evil bad guy is Urizen, reason. And he's warning that if we go to this mechanistic universe, bad things are going to happen. Lo and behold, the 19th century industrial revolution, the wars, the rise of eugenics, totalitarian regimes that say, you know, if Ike's over here and Miguel's in this cubicle and everybody takes the same medicine and everybody just kind of marches along and everything can be fixed by adding and subtracting and pills and, you know, and fixing your behavior. That was a huge Gnostic warning 2,000 years ago and throughout history. And here we are in 2023, Ike, living that Gnostic nightmare. And the Gnostics, like the Hermeticists, were all about, as you know, go inward, go to the source, live a more holistic life or thought where your mind works together with imagination, intuition, logic, and so many of their ideas that got discarded. And now we're finding out, and certainly in the occult world, that these ideas might be the only thing that's going to save our ass before it's too late.
Yeah, and that is so freaking important. You know, even though I didn't really study Gnosticism, to be honest with you. I had a connection with it. I was vaguely aware of it. I couldn't make heads or tails of, you know, there's so many different variations, and somebody says it's this, and somebody's using gnosis in this term. It's not necessarily giving you a clear pathway to the pursuit of gnosis, that's the most important thing, I think. And what I found actually in my I kind of stumbled into the occult. And you go through this, alchemical initiatic lineage, and these are the things that you come to find, regardless of Gnosticism as well, because it's a truism. It's the way that the holistic creation works. Is you have to, I do like really, really super kind of academically researched presentations, but that's not what I'm constantly peddling. My main thing that I'm trying to tell people is like you have to get out of this strictly analytical framework, because the mind in that sense is like a knife. It cuts, right? The term analysis means to take apart. So you can't get to a holistic unity by constantly chopping things into smaller and smaller pieces. And it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I've not made that connection yet until just now. Is that it's really not just this system of oppression coming down on us. It's this entrainment of the mind to think rationally so that we choose the cage, we choose the cubicle, which is actually extremely interesting. But, for me, as you were saying, ideologies, beliefs, they all affect the way we view the world. But for me, Gnosticism makes everything makes sense. The good, the bad. For me, the spirit of Christ, the spirit of Antichrist, if you're going that route, all of it.
And the other thing I wanted to say, and sorry, what maybe frustrates people is that, yes, the experience of gnosis cannot be written down. It's that ecstatic, transcendental experience. But Gnosticism, I mean, people like James Lindsay and even Jordan Peterson, they're completely wrong. Obviously, they call it a parasitic religion. But Gnosticism at its core is shamanistic. I mean, it is direct, like Hermeta says, and it is deeply tapping into ancient Egyptian mysteries and other mystery religions of old. I mean, some scholars, very good scholars from James McGrath, Margaret Barker, April DeConnick say all Gnosticism is the ancient cult of Ashera, that animistic, holistic, shamanistic Hebrew religion that got suppressed by the cult of Yahweh and was smuggled. So one thing we can say, although shamanism is called the oldest religion in the world, it's not even a religion. It's a spiritual modality that attaches itself to things, right? You can have a Mongolian shaman, you can have a South American shaman, a Muslim shaman. You know, Gnosticism is also a spiritual modality or metaphysical orientation, so it will attach itself to different religions. That's how people get confused. Like, why is there Christian Gnosticism? Why are the Hermeticists pagan Gnostics? Why? What about these Kabbalists? Oh, they're Jewish Gnostics, you know, and it confuses people. But when you get that and you start seeing their core tenets, shamanism, simulation, direct experience, a deep fight to understanding the idea of suffering, like the Buddha did, you know, unapologetic, work to understand suffering and evil, then it's a lot easier to understand also. And I understand there's two schools of thought. They're fine because things are evolving. There are those like William Barnstone and others who feel that Gnosticism is that inner light that you wake up. So it's more elastic. You know what I mean? There are others that say, no, it's more closer to the Sethian, simulation, archons, astral flights through the air and all that. So I understand and I accept both because, again, things change. There was a time when I first started doing Gnosticism, the theory was like they were influenced by the Egyptians and the Zoroastrians. And then in a span of like 10 years, it got completely taken off the table and it was just a Christian heresy. Now it's starting to lean back, and then scholars are like, oh, it was an Egyptian mystery after all. So things shift. But I always knew that it's so obvious it's Egyptian, it's ancient Egyptian mysteries. You'd have to be blind.
Yeah, at least Egyptian. And that's interesting, you know, because I guess you could view the Iamblichian theurgy from the Neoplatonic tradition as a type of like Hellenistic shamanism in that sense, which is really cool. And what Iamblichus was explicitly trying to do was reintroduce the Egyptian mysteries to Greek rationalization, you know, that kind of stuff. But I'm interested. This is a little bit of a tough question, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts. How would you define or characterize gnosis? Is it personal? Is it universal? What do you think?
I think it's very personal. Obviously, the two components of the Gnostics is the intellectual understanding of the universe. The Gnostics were not going to compromise the mind. They were part of, you know, you're talking about Iamblichus. They were part of that Alexandrian philosophical, skeptical kind of vibe from the Hermetists to the Neoplatonists, you know? So there is an intellectual rigor, but to the Gnostics, it always leads, again, simulation, archons, the nature of humanity, so forth. And that's fine because sometimes mystics drive me crazy because they're like, well, you can't read a book. And I'm like, what? I'm sure you've read a fiction book or a nonfiction, and you can feel something stirring with you. You can feel your soul like, oh yeah, it's moving, and you close the book and you're like, oh my God, reality is never going to be the same. You know, intellectual, and Plato, of course, would agree 100%. Your mind can create this mystical experience, this ineffable feeling. And, you know, first time you watch Star Wars or walk out a theater or think of a movie and you're like, I have been changed in this ritual. So it's okay to feel that way. But then there's the experience of gnosis, which I think Jeremy Puma said, well, gnosis isn't the result, it's what brings results. So it takes you up the ladder of being, but the culmination, there's no describing it. It's like what did Stefan Heller said? At the door of gnosis, all isms must be left behind, including Gnosticism. But that's something you and I could barely describe. And even though we seek it every day, that is it's just what all mystics and seekers are looking for. The Gnostics just said gnosis is a bit, there's certain steps to get there, just like the Buddhists would say there's certain steps to get there, although Buddhists and Gnostics actually agree more than they would disagree.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. So I guess there is room for the idea or the concept of modern Gnosticism, right? Because it's not something that ever really goes away. It will change shape, I guess, in accordance with the needs of the time and the vernacular of the time, but it's not strictly, right? Because academics are very prevalent, particularly in Gnosticism, as some of the scholars you mentioned before. And some of them, not all of them, have a real issue with the term Gnosticism. But I think it's highly useful. But this isolation of the historic versus the practical application in the modern times, from what you're saying, I understand that there is room for a modern kind of Gnosticism. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, religions and movements are not static. They're always evolving and moving with the times and innovating themselves. There is absolutely nothing wrong. They're alive, and that's why I enjoy the work of April DeConnick and Jeff Kripal at Rice, because they're studying not just the ancients but how it materializes today. And obviously, modern Gnosticism today would be just probably ufology. That's something I missed about why Gnosticism is irrelevant. As Chris Knoll said, the Gnostics were history's first UFO cult. Sure, Mithras and all these cats were like, oh, in the Hellenistic myth, we're gonna fly through the zodiac and do that. The Gnostics were like, screw that, we are going beyond all the zodiac. We are going through these portals to these unknown universes, and we might be back. We hope we're back. We're gonna come back with some treasure. So they went, again, as Eric Davis said, they went way out, far out than any of the other off-worlders or mystics. So and of course, they came back with the news. Hey, there's alien beings out there trying to make contact with us. Some aren't very friendly. Let's prepare this place because they're going to visit us or they're already here. So that's one way modern Gnosticism certainly can materialize today. Again, just look at David Ike, lizard people and all that. Look at some of the others who are popular. So yeah, there's lots of room and a lot of evolution. And I by no means, I don't judge any. You've seen my show. I don't judge anybody and say you're ridiculous because I know it's a joy to watch these living things. As long as you're not killing people or abusing people, go with it, run with it.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely are one of the most agreeable podcast hosts. It's good because what happens is the show becomes a forum for ideas in general. That's how it becomes so interesting to listen to. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to hear today. So that's what's excellent about it, other than obviously, and I want to get to this, your intros get me psyched, man. I mean, but I would consider I'm a little shy from calling myself a modern Gnostic. I'm just shy in that way, but I actually am a deacon in a Gnostic church that is in the spirit of Valentinian Gnosticism. I'd say I'm a little bit more along the lines of Basilides. But there are little pockets, little groups out there still doing, while they're orthoprax, right? We do the Catholic Mass and to a certain degree, we do Eucharist, we do the seven sacraments, but we're not orthodox. We avail ourselves of the Gnostic Gospels when we talk about these things. But one thing that I wanted to definitely mention is that you recently hosted an event called Meet the Archons. Can you tell us more about this conference? I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be from here on a regular thing. Was this like the second annual or?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really any Gnostic conferences. I believe there is one in Austin. I forgot the name of it, but they only do it every 3 years. Rice University was doing them every 2 years with April DeConnick and Jeff Kripal. But unfortunately, COVID kind of destroyed, their funding is kind of all over the place. So I was like, in the middle of the pandemic, it seemed like the best time to do one. And it was actually my friend Ivan, he lives in Mexico, and he was doing the I Ching. He's an amazing I Ching. Sorry, I said I Ching. Oh my God, it's like saying the C word. But the I Ching, and he said, I just did the I Ching, Miguel, and it says we have to do a conference in Cancun or in the Yucatan. I was like, oh yeah, middle of the pandemic, borders are closed, there's barely any airplanes. So we rode with it, and it was a big success. I mean, considering more than 50 people showed up, hundreds tuned in. We called it astronosis because, again, we wanted to focus on the, ufology, space alien archon aspect of it, and it was a success. So early in the summer, Ivan did the I Ching again, and we decided, and it came out it should be in the United States. I brought it up to the Theosophical Society here in Wheaton. They were very happy, great people, fun people to hang out with. They hosted us, and it was even bigger this time. So I guess, yeah, seems like we should continue. The theme was Meet the Archons. Again, Astronosis, Archons, depending on the I Ching, but I think next year I would like to do something with Sophia. And I'll let the Oracle decide where we're going to do it. If the Oracle says Southern France or North Korea, I'm going to go with it. I'm getting to, you're the same way. It's not that you become wiser. You get tired going against the gods
Oh,
because they always win.
Oh, yeah.
So
I was telling, I tell people that regularly. You can't run from it. You can try.
just go for it. Liam, just do what they tell you.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So about the archons in Gnostic communities, where there's a tendency for us to blame them for everything. It's kind of the cosmic scapegoats. So here's something that's interesting to me, because I'm someone who, through the course of initiation and study, and I don't exteriorize the locus of authority to only what is objectively verifiable. My subjective experience is what I die with. So I need to incorporate that in its own sphere of authority. So I'm able to hold two ideas in front of me simultaneously without any cognitive dissonance until I don't know. I decide to stop thinking about it. One of the things I've been holding in front of me is the idea of these Gnostic entities, the cosmology. Is it literal? Is it, are these models? Are the archons, anthropomorphized kind of ideals? What do you think? What's your view on this?
Well, the answer is always going to be yes. Yes, they're everything. I mean, again, we were just talking about if we get into that silly linear thinking, we're trying to get away as mystics, and we want to stop falling into that trap. Just like we want to get out of the trap of there is linear time, there is death. All these things that we've worked for, we have to get out of it. So saying the archons are this, immediately, you fall into the trap. You fall into their talons, if you would. Ancient people, as talking to scholars who've done work on Mayans and others, said the ancients didn't have that problem. I mean, they didn't see anything as linear. They saw everything at once. Their consciousness saw time. So if they saw a bear, they could see God, food, animal, friend, guide, all at once. It was a different way of seeing it. So the archons are definitely many things, and not scholars, but for example, writer John Lamlash and David Ike, they're like, no, they are these cosmic beings. They are the stellar wardens of this universe. They control the universe, fate, time, and all that, but they're also mind parasites because they are a twisted form of Hermes, right? As above, so below. We want Hermes to be up there and in here. Well, all the archons do is just copy. They're like algorithms that copy the divine realm. So they're going to be like Hermes or Jesus, and they're going to be controlling the universe and in our heads. They're going to manifest as people, their ideas, their concepts. They are reality, and they are us. So you can hold all of these things together and not have to commit either. I mean, there was a friend who once said, I've never met an archon, but I feel their effects every day. So it's like you realize there is something wrong with the universe. So, but of course, you're like trying to find your animus and animus where it fit. You also got to find out how much evil and good you want to do. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with seeing the universe as totally evil and totally good at once. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
And in that state, I fall in a state of complete love and compassion for both the evil and the good, because I know they're mixed. They're trying to find their way. As Paul said, the birth pangs of the universe are going on. So I can have complete compassion and love for the process, while at the same time trying to fight against the evil of this world.
That's a great way to look at it, actually. We have this thing now where it's like, there's this non-duality push in a lot of occult circles, and it's kind of just this, to the nth degree, the way of non-striving, I guess you would say. But it's to the point where I don't do it. You can do anything, or you should do nothing. Hands off it. None of it really matters. But yeah,
it's like you would know. It's like suppressing the first step in Alcoholics Anonymous. I am evil. I'm the problem. I'm the alcohol. I'm the destroyer of my life.
Yeah.
You can't just all kumbaya and go to step 2 and 3.
Yes.
Every day is step 1. So you're right. They skipped the part about evil, darkness, shadow, and all that.
Yeah. And because really, like you're saying, to your point, right? I mean, my next question for you is going to be, what kind of things, in your experience, right? You definitely speak as someone with the eloquence and depth. You're telegraphing that you've walked this path. You've not just studied it intellectually. So given that understanding, my next question was going to be, to people who want to sort of start, becoming aware, or wriggling out of these systems of control, what steps could they take? What are some preliminaries, do you think?
Start listening. That's easy. I was walking, and I do these long walks. I call them my Artemis summer walks, because the goddess called me. And again, I just do whatever the gods tell me what to do. I just shut my mouth and do it. So this goddess was calling me to walk, and I was walking, and I said, what is enlightenment? And Bob Thurman, who's Uma Thurman's father, and he's a great Buddhist master. Check out his podcast or YouTube, but he's amazing. He once said that enlightenment is simply being useful. And again, we go to AA. What do they say? Every day, have you helped out? Have you helped somebody out? That's what go to meetings, help somebody out. Go to meetings, and you and I will complicate things. Well, there's got to be more. There's got to be some grand insight. No, go to meetings and help somebody out. And that's what Bob Thurman was saying. When you're enlightened, you're in the flow of the universe, My dogs, cats, birds, they know exactly where they need to be and what they need to do. We humans have a special place, as Hermes said, because we're between heaven and earth. But at the end of the day, we need to be useful to be enlightened. That's it. And I also thought enlightenment is simply listening. Why? Because all the answers are there. Our soul is always speaking to us. The gods are speaking to us. The dark forces are speaking to our shadow. Everybody wants a seat at the table for every human because of our position in the universe. If we listen, we will understand what needs to be done. Or sometimes these beings, entities, our childhood trauma, our holy mission, our holy guardian angel, sometimes they just want to be listened to. They've been suppressed for so long, and they just decided, listen to us. We want a seat at the table. So the more I listen, the better I am. Hold on a second. God, I hate Facebook Messenger. There you go. Sorry, they weren't listening. But the more I listen, the more I understand what my mission needs to be. And that's part of the inner journey, the going inward, as the Gnostics and the Hermeticists said. Remember, when you read the Corpus Hermeticum or the Nag Hammadi Library, Poimandres or Jesus will be like, let's do this ritual, let's pray. And then suddenly they'll stop and they go, shh, listen. They're telling you, shut up and listen. Just stop. Listen to the flow of the universe, and all the answers will be there. Everything is at your fingertips. Now, the hard part is obviously the Gnostics being anarchists and like shamans being a spiritual modality. There's no BuzzFeed listicle or anything like that. Their message is always simple. You have to find out what works for you, because the Gnostics were split up in all these lodges across the Roman Empire, and they didn't agree. They had different rituals, they had different ceremonies, and some did sex magic, some did simply Catholic rituals, some did meditation. So a lot of them did baptism of some sort. You have to find out what you are, because again, in the mystic community is all like, well, you are a unique snowflake. You are a shard of God. Good, then figure out your shit, man. Why are you doing what everybody else is doing? Right? You're God, right? Well, then figure out how to stay God. So you have to find out what works for you, as long as you've got this impetus of altered state of mind, quieting down, going inward. So I always offer people what's worked for me and only me. You're different, Ike, is uh, some sort of plant medicine when you can. I do ayahuasca with a good shaman. Any Gnostic or Hermetics would say, make sure your Hierophant is, he's on the up and up. Some sort of quietude or meditation. I like different kinds. So I like the Sedona method. I like Tonglen meditation. Sometimes TM. I kind of mix and match. And then some sort of tool to listen to your soul or the gods or your inner self. I do a lot of dream work, active imagination. I do therapy with people so I can understand, what is my ego bullshitting, or is it coming from my soul? So I do all this mixture of things, but it works for me, and I'm always tweaking. Because the archons will shift reality on you at an instant. What works yesterday won't work tomorrow. And even worse, Hermes is the god of the mind, but he's almost the god of tricks. The biggest trickster, more dangerous than any archon, is that thing between our ears. That's what Hermes does. As I was saying, Hermes doesn't care about morality. He's about the journey. He wants to take you on a wild journey. So
yeah.
you gotta always be quiet the mind, try to see reality. Does that make sense? I know to some people it's confusing, because I used to want just a formula and like, give me my formula and I'll go sit in the pew and I'll be happy.
No, yeah. I mean, there's no cookie cutter way to gnosis. I think that though people, to me, the systems and walking the path, walking it is the teaching. The symbols, if anything, are the teachings, because symbols are they stimulate that which is within us that is pre-verbal, right? Not only on an individual level, but a collective level. And so these are the teachings. The rest is commentary. And I think, you do need a good, as you say, hierophant or shaman or somebody who's walked the path before you to point you in a direction. And I think that, to be honest, I don't think I could have said that better myself. The entire piece.
The other thing I wanted to say too, advice, you hit it on the head. Create something beautiful, because you are a creator, like the mind of God. The symbolic life is so important, like our ancestors lived. And give yourself permission to suspend your disbelief for a time. There are times where I'll read about a religion and I'll say, I'm going to give myself 2 months and I am going to completely believe in everything they say. I'm going to do I am going to walk there. I am this religion. But after 2 months, I turn it off and I say, okay, Miguel, Hermes, are we better? Are we better people? Are we more useful? Do we feel better? Are we going to bed with a cleaner conscience? And then I'll just sort of take these things from this religion. So cosplay, suspend your disbelief, have fun.
That's great advice. And I also, I want to emphasize the point for any listeners about, what you said about what Hermes does, constantly shifting reality on you. And you find a lot of things that what I like to call archonic systems of control, even in larger society, they're constantly becoming their opposite. It's some parties, maybe even if you talk about politics, some parties 15 years ago were all for freedom of speech. Now they're against it. Everything the ground is constantly moving, and you have to be tuned into what's happening underneath, not just the exterior. But one thing that I wanted to mention, because this is great fun for me, you seem to be a really great fan of film. And I really consider myself a huge fan as well. Used to tell people I kick myself in the ass every day for not going to film school. But what are your thoughts on things like film and other, art forms and media in terms of their ability to inspire or influence people in a certain direction?
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, he who controls or expresses the myth, our inner language, those archetypal images, those forces from the soul, or that message that gives meaning to the tribe and gives us a perspective of belonging to the universe and facing the horror of the universe. That's where it's at, right? It used to be books, opera, it used to be temples. Now Hollywood has took over. I mean, it's always fascinating when you realize that the gaming industry, when it comes to money, is like 10 times bigger than Hollywood. But we love our films and TV shows. We love talking about actors and all that because they grabbed on to the myth, for better or worse. I would say for worse these days, but well, it's all full of propaganda from then, But
Without a doubt.
myths are translated and they come out and we love them. So, I mean, and again, going back to shill for the Gnostics, you cannot argue against the truth that the greatest modern myth of our times is the Matrix. It's part of our lexicon. We rely on it. It's one of the most impactful movies. So many other people have copycatted. So that right there is important. You cannot deny that there is a whole generation of screenwriters and directors that were deeply influenced by Philip K. Dick. And all these fantasy sci-fi movies coming out today, you feel Philip K. Dick's thumb or footprint on them. And Philip K. Dick was admittedly very influenced by Gnosticism. So you cannot deny that Carl Jung is more popular than ever. And his ideas of psychology do influence our art because, the Jungians always talk about how art and psychology are so enmeshed and they must be expressed. So these are certainly Gnostic times. But again, one of the rules I always tell people, regardless of whether you're criticizing somebody in the past, whether you think this is a good idea, whether you think Gnosticism is weaponized and the Nazis were Gnostics, there is an argument to that. I always say everything casts a shadow. Everything has a shadow side, whether it's Thelema, whether it's Christianity, whether, everybody has a body count or is hiding pedophiles or the idea will corrupt you and destroy you in some way. So that is a cosmic law that cannot be broken. I guess maybe the Manichaeans were right, Ike?
I love that.
Don't judge because everything casts a shadow. You just have to find the light in it.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's the whole thing. You can't, at least in my conception, and this isn't just from Gnosticism, but the duality of this realm is ceaseless. It's never going to stop until the whole party's over. Because that to ask for it, the entire thing is predicated on a spectrum of polarity. To ask for only good is to ask for eternal sunlight, and even that becomes oppressive. We have no way of orienting ourselves. I think that's brilliant.
No mystery, yeah. Part of what makes us human is we love the mystery. The gods may want to know everything, but for us to be sane, we have to embrace the mystery and the ambiguity of existence. That's probably why the gods are jealous. I don't think my cats are jealous. They're fine with knowing everything they need.
So I'm gonna test the waters here. I know you said don't get you started. But one thing that's interesting, I listened to your podcast that you did with Gordon White, and he kind of asked you in the beginning, another great podcaster. He asked you in the beginning, you just kind of randomly hit him up to talk about Legion, and I remember after he said that, you said something to the effect of like what you said earlier. You just you're following the gods and what they're asking you to do, and I believe you followed them to Artemis, I think, as you've mentioned a few times, but also, and this is really interesting to me, you followed them to Elvis Presley. And are you finished with the biography on him? I mean, can we talk about this?
Yeah. Okay. Not only am I finished, but that's what we're talking about with I'm going to blame the archons. We're kind of rescheduled this interview because it's easier. I love blaming the archons, but it also shows my shadow into how I project every day. So it's a great exercise by we humans love to project. But one of the things is there was a publisher who's accepted it, a major publisher. So the bio is coming out probably next year. So that the story again is I think we forgot one of the most important things, Ike, is follow your synchronicities. Synchronicities are so important. Yeah, the voice within you, but as Jung said, synchronicities like God speaking to you. And sometimes the gods are like hammering, but this is what happened. I was doing a podcast with this lady, and she talked about how she dated Elvis Presley's stepbrother, and suddenly, boom, something clicked in me. And I started talking to her about occult things about Presley, and we just had a great chat because I had heard things and read some books, and it just stayed with me. And I always know when you get this sort of satori, say, take it with you, sit with it. So then I went to Portugal and I did some ayahuasca ceremonies with Santo Daime. There was no Elvis in there, but I remember Elvis kept appearing. Like I would walk into my aunt's house and she would be staring and she goes, "What about Elvis, Miguel?" I was like, oh, I never liked Elvis. And I was like, oh. And then I realized the TV was there. She was talking about Baz Luhrmann's movie. She was asking me about the movie, but everywhere I would go, Elvis was appearing. And then my behavior went wrong. Like I came back to the United States and I could not stop listening to Elvis for 2 months in the car on iTunes. I just couldn't stop. And for Halloween, I never dress up. And Halloween, I got this urge to dress up as Elvis. And the synchronicities were there coming from different places. I turned around. In the United States, that's not hard. You're going to run into something Beatles or Elvis. But it kept going. And I was resisting and resisting. And then in January, I'm walking the dogs in the snow and my left hip starts hurting. I could barely walk. And I'm like, motherfucker, I'm sorry if I curse. I was like, I'm 55. This is going to be one of those reconstructive surgeries. My left, it was painful to walk the dogs or walked in general. And then suddenly I was talking to some guests and I was like talking about Elvis and they're like, Miguel, just write the book. And in February, I started writing the book. I knew nothing about Elvis. And the left hip, which is how Elvis would start shaking his body when he was doing his dance, the pain went away in February, just poop, went away. So yeah, there was energies from my body telling me. So I just started writing this book and it just fell through, and it took 6 months it took like 4 months to write, and now it's should see the light of day next year. But again, there was listening, there was synchronicities, there was the resistance. If I had not written that book, I'd probably been in the hospital, or the gods or whatever find a way to ruin your life, drive you crazy, get you to relapse. They'll find a way to get your attention. But so I listened, and other things, whether it's the show Legion or other things, I'm meditating, I hear this voice and I just go for it. And sometimes, people think I'm crazy, but I'm fine. And also too, like with the Artemis walks, I realize sometimes there's no reward or even insight. You're meant to do it because your actions might influence something. You might do something and interact with the future inventor or cure of cancer, or somebody who needed a message that will save somebody's life. So sometimes you might not know immediately, but just lean into it, because you will feel better and your chakras will be more aligned and you'll just feel useful, like you're listening. Remember, enlightenment, that's all it is.
Yeah. And, even though movies are fantastic and we're both huge fans, things like this don't happen the way they're portrayed in movies, a lot of the time. I've had sort of visionary experiences fairly frequently that don't culminate to anything. They never make any sense. I never know what they're about. I'm just sitting here waiting for some, day when it's 2020, hindsight.
Are you getting synchronicities with them? Because you have to have the synchronicity. when the synchronicities start piling up and you start journaling your dreams, you'll get better at sort of following where you need to be. And again,
that's actually, believe it or not, something I got early on. I kind of got the picture from, as cliche as it is. Early on, I was reading Paulo Coelho, and he's a magnificent writer. But one of the things that he says in The Alchemist was interpret the omens. And I really found that personally, for my connection, I would say about 80% of it is ominic, exactly as you're saying. Interpreting my surroundings are constantly communicating with me, I think. And that was a product, really, it came to life after, somewhere in the middle of like my alchemical initiation in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
That's a good batting average. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, but so I have a canned question that I ask everybody towards the end of the interview. For the audience members that may be new to you or Gnosticism, or even myself, and heard our conversation and want to go a little deeper, could you recommend 3 books or scholars or something like that, that you could point them towards so they could go a little deeper?
God, that's so hard because, again, entry points are so different. I'm sure your entry point to Gnosticism is different than mine. Mine was Valis. Others feel it's Jung. Others feel it's directly reading the Nag Hammadi light. It's so, I almost feel like an archon telling you this. But I would say, if you really want a good book that has the rituals, the history, the mysticism, April de Conick's The Gnostic New Age, I always suggest you get that. That's for sure. Yes. Of course, I'm just going to say Philip K. Dick, Valis, The Divine Invasion, The Transmigration of Timothy Archer. I would say go with that one, or even read his Exegesis, although that's a massive book. I mean, there's one scene in Valis, you go back and you reread them, where there's this guy who is a friend of Philip K. Dick's. A car runs over his beloved cat, and he's always, when I go to heaven, I'm just gonna sit in front of the throne of God with the cat and go, to show him that the universe sucks. And Sophia comes down to earth, but she comes down in the body of an 8-year-old girl because, again, tricksters are gonna trickster. They're not gonna give you what you want. They're gonna make things harder. So the guy goes to Sophia and tells him about the cat, and Sophia, little girl, goes, maybe your cat was stupid. And the guy goes, oh, she's so wise. She's right. It's God's fault. He created this cat. God, Anyway, that scene just made me laugh. That's what Philip K. Dick does in Valis. He just plays with these ideas. But I would say those 2. I can't think of anything else. Maybe rewatch the first Matrix and
there you go.
Try to backtrack some Gnostic ideas, see if they work better.
Yeah. Great. So lastly, is there anything, so you've got the book that you're writing. Is there anything else that you want to tell people that you've got going on or in the works or to check out that you're producing right now?
No, right now, I would say just go to my website, thegodabovegod.com, or Aeon Byte, type in Aeon Byte, AEONBYTE, and then the website has whatever entry point you had. I've got the podcast. I've got the sort of the replay of the Gnostic Conference, which is pretty affordable. I've got a course, online course, very affordable. I've got my books. I've got a couple of books. I've got recommended readings, YouTube videos, social media. So go to my site and maybe see what your entry point is. I've got a section of intro to Gnosticism articles and videos. So go there and play around and see what speaks to you. Again, follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell said.
Excellent. Miguel Conner, this has been an honor, and boy, what a pleasure. This was such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Enjoyed it. It was a blast as always. Thanks for having me.